Margaret Anderson sat in her living room in Phoenix, Arizona, staring at her car keys on the coffee table. At 73 years old, she had just received news from her doctor that would alter the course of her life. Her vision was deteriorating and driving was no longer safe. The Arizona sun streamed through her window, the same sun that had witnessed 40 years of her independent life in this desert city. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her phone. The contact photo of her daughter, Rebecca, smiled back at her from the screen. Rebecca lived in Seattle, Washington, over 400 miles away. Margaret hesitated before pressing the call button. She had always been the strong one, the one who never asked for help. "Mom, is everything okay?" Rebecca's voice came through, tinged with concern. She rarely received calls from her mother on weekday afternoons. Margaret took a deep breath. "Honey, I need to talk to you about something important." Hey everyone, if you're watching this story unfold, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what happens next. This journey is just beginning. The silence on the other end felt heavy. Margaret could hear the ambient noise of Rebecca's office, keyboards clicking, muffled conversations in the background. "The doctor said I can't drive anymore," Margaret finally said, her voice cracking slightly. "My macular degeneration has progressed. It's not safe." "Oh, Mom." Rebecca's voice softened immediately. "I know you're busy with your life up there in Seattle, but I was wondering—" Margaret paused, gathering courage. "Could I maybe move closer to you? I don't want to be a burden, but—" "Of course, Mom. That's not even a question. We'll figure this out together." The warmth in Rebecca's voice brought tears to Margaret's eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. But what Margaret didn't know was that her simple request would uncover secrets that had been buried for over 30 years. The following week, Rebecca flew to Phoenix to help her mother prepare for the move. The desert heat hit her like a wall as she stepped off the plane, a stark contrast to Seattle's cool drizzle. She rented a car and drove through the familiar streets of her childhood, past the strip malls and palm trees to her mother's modest ranch-style home. Margaret greeted her at the door, looking smaller somehow, more fragile than Rebecca remembered from her last visit 6 months ago. "You look tired, sweetheart," Margaret said, embracing her daughter. "Just the flight, Mom. I'm fine." Rebecca smiled, but her eyes scanned her mother's face with concern. The proud, independent woman who had raised her single-handedly seemed diminished, uncertain. They spent the afternoon sorting through decades of belongings. Boxes accumulated in the living room, items to keep, items to donate, items that held too many memories to categorize easily. "Mom, what about this?" Rebecca held up an old wooden box she'd found in the back of the hallway closet. It was locked, ornate, with intricate carvings on its surface. Margaret's face went pale. "Where did you find that?" "In the closet. What is it?" "Just old papers, nothing important." Margaret reached for the box, but her movements were urgent, almost panicked. Rebecca pulled it back slightly, her curiosity piqued. "Mom, you're acting strange. What's in here?" If you're intrigued by where this is going, hit that like button and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Margaret sat down heavily on the couch, her shoulders sagging. "Rebecca, there are things about our family, about your father, that I never told you." Rebecca's heart began to race. Her father had died when she was only 3 years old, or so she had always been told. A car accident, sudden and tragic. She had no memories of him, only the few photographs her mother had kept, and the stories Margaret occasionally shared. "What do you mean?" Rebecca sat beside her mother, the wooden box resting between them. Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. "Your father, he didn't die in a car accident. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rebecca felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "What are you talking about? You told me—" "I know what I told you. I was trying to protect you." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas didn't die, Rebecca. He left us, and he left because—" She paused, struggling with the words. "Because he had another family. A wife and 2 children in California that I didn't know about until after you were born." Rebecca stood abruptly, the box clattering to the floor. "You've been lying to me for 35 years. I was trying to spare you the pain." Margaret's voice rose, defensive and desperate. "What good would it have done for you to grow up knowing your father was a bigamist, that he chose them over us?" The Arizona heat seemed to intensify in the silent room. Rebecca's mind raced through every memory, every story, every moment she had mourned a father she thought was dead. All of it built on a lie. "I need some air," Rebecca said quietly, grabbing her keys and walking out the door. She drove aimlessly through Phoenix, the city blurring through her tears. The desert landscape stretched endlessly, mirroring the emptiness she felt inside. She pulled into a park and sat on a bench, watching children play while their parents watched nearby. Families. Real families. Not the fractured, dishonest foundation she had been raised on. Her phone buzzed with texts from her mother. She ignored them all. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Rebecca finally returned to the house. Margaret was sitting on the front steps, the wooden box beside her. "I'm so sorry," Margaret said before Rebecca could speak. "I should have told you years ago. I was a coward." Rebecca sat down beside her mother, exhausted from anger and confusion. "Tell me everything. I deserve to know the truth." Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. This story takes some unexpected turns, and you won't want to miss a single moment. Margaret nodded, opening the box with a small key she wore on a chain around her neck. Inside were letters, photographs, legal documents, evidence of a life Rebecca never knew existed. "Thomas Brennan," Margaret began, pulling out a photograph of a handsome man with kind eyes. That was his real name. To me, he was Thomas Anderson. We met in 1985 at a teaching conference in San Diego. I was a substitute teacher, and he said he was a traveling education consultant. She laughed bitterly. He was actually a high school principal in Sacramento, married with 2 kids, a son and a daughter. He kept 2 complete lives running parallel for 3 years before I got pregnant with you. Rebecca looked at the photograph. This stranger was her father. She shared his eyes, his smile. "When did you find out?" "When you were 6 months old. His real wife showed up at my door. She'd hired a private investigator after finding receipts for an apartment in Phoenix." Margaret's voice grew quiet. "She was devastated. Her children were devastated. I was devastated. And Thomas, he chose them. Of course he did. They came first." Did he ever try to contact me?" Margaret pulled out a stack of envelopes bound with a rubber band. "He sent child support checks and letters for years. I kept them all but never told you. I couldn't bear for you to know he existed, but didn't want to be part of your life in any real way." Rebecca took the letters with shaking hands. Years of correspondence from a father who was alive, who knew she existed, but remained a ghost in her life. "Do they know about me, his other family?" Margaret nodded. "His wife knew. I don't know if he ever told the children. His last letter came about 10 years ago. After that, nothing." The 2 women sat in silence as darkness fell over Phoenix, the desert cooling rapidly, stars beginning to emerge in the vast sky above them. "Are we still moving to Seattle?" Margaret asked quietly, her voice small and uncertain. Rebecca wanted to say no. She wanted to leave her mother to face the consequences of her decades-long deception. But when she looked at the elderly woman beside her, frail, scared, and alone, she saw not just the person who had lied to her, but the person who had raised her, loved her, and sacrificed everything to give her a good life. Yes, Rebecca finally said, but no more secrets. Ever. Margaret nodded gratefully, tears streaming down her weathered face. As they went back inside to continue packing, Rebecca glanced once more at the photograph of Thomas Brennan. She had a half-brother and half-sister somewhere in the world. People who shared her blood but didn't know she existed. The question that would haunt her for weeks to come was simple. Should she try to find them? Chapter 2. Echoes from Sacramento. 3 weeks later, Margaret's belongings were loaded into a moving truck bound for Seattle. The house in Phoenix, the only home Rebecca had ever known, was sold to a young couple expecting their first child. The irony wasn't lost on Rebecca as she watched them sign the papers, excited about their future while she was uncovering the buried past. The drive from Phoenix to Seattle took 3 days. Margaret rode with Rebecca in her car, while the moving truck followed its own route. The landscape changed dramatically as they traveled north, from desert to forest, from heat to rain, from the life Margaret had built to an uncertain future. Hey everyone watching, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below about what you think Rebecca should do next, and if you're new here, subscribe to join our community. They stopped the first night in Northern California, checking into a modest motel off Interstate 5. As Margaret settled into bed, exhausted from the journey, Rebecca sat outside their room, staring at her laptop screen. Sacramento was only 2 hours away. She had spent the past 3 weeks reading every letter her father had sent. His words revealed a man torn by guilt and responsibility, someone who loved her but couldn't figure out how to incorporate her into his life. The last letter, dated October 2013, mentioned that he was retiring from his position as principal at Lincoln High School in Sacramento. Lincoln High School. Rebecca opened a new browser tab and searched for the school. The website loaded quickly, showing a modern building with smiling students. She clicked through to the staff directory, then to the alumni section, and finally to archived news articles. There, in an article from 2014, she found him. Thomas Brennan, retiring after 32 years in education, pictured with his family at his retirement party. A woman with silver hair stood beside him, his wife Carolyn, and on his other side, 2 adults in their late 30s or early 40s, his legitimate children. Rebecca zoomed in on their faces. The man had her father's strong jawline. The woman had his eyes, the same eyes Rebecca saw in her own mirror every morning. Her half-siblings, Nathan Brennan and Julia Brennan Martinez, according to the photo caption. Before she could overthink it, Rebecca opened Facebook and searched for their names. Julia's profile appeared immediately, public enough to see basic information. She lived in Sacramento, worked as a nurse practitioner, had 3 children. Her profile picture showed a happy family at what looked like a backyard barbecue. Nathan's profile was more private, but his profile picture showed him in a police uniform. Sacramento Police Department, according to his limited bio. These were real people with real lives. Would reaching out destroy the peace they'd built? Or did they deserve to know they had a sister? If you're as hooked on this story as we are, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. Rebecca slept fitfully that night, her dreams filled with faces she'd never met and conversations she'd never had. The next morning, as they loaded their belongings back into the car, Margaret noticed her daughter's exhaustion. "You didn't sleep," she observed. "We're 2 hours from Sacramento," Rebecca said flatly. Margaret's face paled. "Rebecca, please don't." "Don't what? Don't want to meet my own family? Don't want to know the people I'm related to?" "They don't know you exist. You can't just show up and—" "I'm not showing up anywhere," Rebecca interrupted. "But I can't just drive past and pretend they're not there either." They drove in tense silence until they reached the outskirts of Sacramento. Rebecca took the exit without discussing it further, ignoring her mother's protests. "Where are you going?" Margaret asked nervously. "Lincoln High School. I just want to see where he worked." The school was in a pleasant suburban neighborhood, surrounded by tall trees that provided shade over sidewalks where students walked. It was Saturday, so the campus was mostly empty, except for a few maintenance workers and what looked like a soccer practice on the field. Rebecca parked across the street and simply stared at the building. Her father had walked these halls for over 3 decades. He had shaped young minds, had been respected and admired, had lived a complete and fulfilling life, one that didn't include her. He was a good man. "Rebecca," Margaret said quietly, "that's what makes this all so complicated. He wasn't a villain, he just made mistakes, terrible mistakes." "Did he ever talk about me? In the letters?" Margaret nodded. "He asked about you constantly. What you looked like, what you were interested in, how you were doing in school. He sent money for your education. He just couldn't figure out how to be present without destroying his other family. So he chose to destroy ours instead." Before Margaret could respond, Rebecca's phone rang. An unknown number with a 916 area code. Sacramento. Her heart pounded as she answered. "Hello? Is this Rebecca Anderson?" A woman's voice, professional but strained. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Julia Martinez. I think you might be my half-sister." What a twist! If you're loving this story, smash that like button and tell us in the comments what you think will happen next. And don't forget to subscribe. Rebecca's hands went numb. Margaret's eyes widened in shock. "How did you—" "I got an alert this morning that someone had been searching for information about my father, Thomas Brennan. I work in healthcare, and I have monitoring on my family members' names for identity theft reasons. When I saw your searches were coming from an IP address registered to someone with the last name Anderson, I remembered." "You knew about me?" Julia's voice broke slightly. "Not until a few months ago. My father died in March, pancreatic cancer. Before he passed, he told my brother and me the truth about everything. He said he had another daughter in Phoenix named Rebecca, and that he'd failed you his entire life. He made us promise to find you, but we didn't know how. We didn't know if you even knew about us." The world tilted sideways. Dead. Her father was dead. She would never meet him, never hear his voice, never get the chance to confront him, or forgive him, or understand him. "I'm in Sacramento right now," Rebecca heard herself say. "I'm sitting outside Lincoln High School." "Stay there," Julia said immediately. "Please, I'm 15 minutes away." Rebecca ended the call and looked at her mother, who was crying silently. "He's dead," Rebecca whispered. "Oh, honey." Margaret reached for her daughter's hand. "She's coming, Julia. She's coming here. Do you want me to stay with you?" Rebecca shook her head. "No. This is something I need to do alone. Take the car, find a coffee shop. I'll call you when we're done." Margaret hesitated, then nodded. She squeezed Rebecca's hand once more before getting out of the car and calling a rideshare service. Rebecca sat alone, watching the minutes tick by on her phone. 13 minutes, 12 minutes, 10 minutes. A silver Honda pulled up beside her car. A woman who looked remarkably like Rebecca stepped out. Same height, same dark hair, with early streaks of grey, same intense eyes. She was wearing scrubs, as if she'd come directly from work. They stood facing each other across the sidewalk. Two strangers connected by blood and betrayal and loss. "Rebecca?" Julia's voice was gentle. "Julia." Without another word, Julia crossed the distance between them and pulled Rebecca into a hug. It was awkward at first, but then Rebecca felt something inside her break open, and she hugged her sister back, both of them crying in the shadow of the school where their father had spent his career. This is getting so emotional. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the final chapter. Leave a comment with your city and tell us what you're feeling right now. When they finally separated, Julia gestured toward the school. "There's a park behind the building. Let's walk." They moved in silence until they reached a small park with benches overlooking a pond. Ducks floated peacefully on the water, oblivious to the magnitude of the moment unfolding on the shore. "Nathan wanted to be here too, my brother, but he's on duty," Julia explained. "He's a police officer. When I called him about your searches, he was the one who said we should reach out immediately before you left the area." "This is surreal," Rebecca said. "This morning, I didn't think you knew I existed. Now I'm sitting here with you." Julia pulled out her phone and opened a folder of photos. "Dad kept everything separate for so long, but before he died, he gave us this." She showed Rebecca a photo album on her phone, swiping through images. There were pictures of Rebecca as a baby, as a toddler, as a child on her first day of school. Photos that Margaret must have sent over the years, preserved by a father who loved from a distance. "He looked at these all the time in his final weeks," Julia said softly. "He kept saying your name, Rebecca. My youngest daughter, Rebecca. The daughter I failed. Why didn't he just be there? Why couldn't he figure out how to be part of my life?" Julia's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I've asked myself that 1,000 times since learning about you. The truth is, I think he was a coward. He loved our mother, my mother, and he couldn't bear to hurt her more than he already had. And the longer he went without telling us about you, the harder it became. By the time Nathan and I were old enough to understand, it felt too late, or at least that's what he convinced himself." "Did your mother know the whole time?" Julia nodded. "She found out when you were a baby. It nearly destroyed their marriage. She gave him an ultimatum, cut off all contact with you and your mother, or she would leave and take us with her. He chose us, but he couldn't completely let go, so he sent money and letters through a lawyer. It was his compromise, stay connected financially while remaining absent personally. That must have devastated her too. Your mother." "It did. She died 5 years ago. Heart attack. I think she carried the pain of that betrayal her entire life. She never fully trusted him again." Julia paused. "Rebecca, there are no winners in this story. Everyone lost something." They sat in silence, watching the ducks, each processing decades of complicated family history. "What was he like?" Rebecca finally asked. "As a father?" Julia smiled despite her tears. "He was wonderful, strict but fair. He coached Nathan's little league team and came to every one of my dance recitals. He was patient with homework and always knew how to make us laugh. He wasn't perfect, but he was present. And that makes this even harder, doesn't it? Knowing he was capable of being a good father, just not to everyone." Rebecca felt a sharp pain in her chest. Grief for what she'd never had, and anger at a man who couldn't figure out how to love all his children equally. "Nathan and I want you in our lives," Julia said firmly. "If you want that too. We have 3 kids each, your nieces and nephews. They deserve to know their aunt. We can't fix the past, but we can build something new going forward." "I'm moving to Seattle with my mother," Rebecca said. "That's why we were on the road. She's getting older and can't drive anymore." "Seattle's not that far. We can visit. You can visit. We can figure this out." Julia took Rebecca's hand. "Dad made us promise to find you and make this right. Let us try?" Rebecca looked at this woman, her sister, and saw sincerity in her eyes. She thought about her father, who carried his guilt to the grave. She thought about her mother, who lied to protect her. She thought about the complicated, messy nature of families and forgiveness. "Okay," Rebecca said finally, "let's try." They exchanged phone numbers and social media information. Julia showed Rebecca photos of her children, and Rebecca shared pictures of her life in Seattle. They talked for 2 more hours, covering years of missed conversations, learning each other's histories, finding common ground in their differences. When Rebecca finally called her mother to pick her up, she felt lighter somehow. The anger was still there. The grief was still there. But so was something new: hope. Margaret arrived in the rideshare car, her face etched with worry. Julia stood and approached her, the two women who had loved the same man, whose lives had been irrevocably intertwined by his choices. "Mrs. Anderson," Julia said carefully, "please call me Margaret." "Margaret, thank you for sending those photos over the years. They meant everything to my father." "And they mean everything to us now." Margaret's face crumpled. "I'm so sorry for all of this, for all the pain." "We all made choices," Julia said gently, "some better than others. But we're here now, and that's what matters." The two women embraced briefly, a moment of peace between victims of the same deception. As Rebecca and Margaret got back in the car to continue their journey to Seattle, Rebecca looked back once more at the park where she'd met her sister. The sun was setting over Sacramento, painting everything in golden light. What an incredible turn of events. Make sure to like this video if you're feeling all the emotions, and subscribe if you want to see how this family's story concludes. Comment below with your city and your thoughts. "Are you okay?" Margaret asked as they merged back onto the interstate. "I don't know," Rebecca answered honestly, "but I think I will be." They drove north toward Seattle, toward the future, carrying the weight of the past but finally unburdened by secrets. Chapter 3. Starting over in the rain. The Seattle rain was exactly as Rebecca remembered, constant, gentle, more of a mist than a proper downpour. It had been 3 months since they'd arrived in the Pacific Northwest, and Margaret was slowly adjusting to her new life in a small apartment in the Wallingford neighborhood, just 15 minutes from Rebecca's house. The transition hadn't been easy. Margaret struggled with the gloomy weather after decades under the Arizona sun. The layout of the apartment confused her deteriorating vision. But slowly, with Rebecca's help and the support of a local senior center, she was building a new routine. Rebecca visited every other day, helping with groceries, medications, and appointments. They were learning to navigate their relationship with honesty for the first time. No more secrets, just the complicated truth of two women bound by blood and history. On a particularly grey Saturday morning in early autumn, Rebecca's phone rang while she was helping her mother organize her medication boxes. "It's Julia," Rebecca said, stepping into the hallway to answer. "Hey, how's the Pacific Northwest treating you?" "Wet," Rebecca laughed. "How are things in Sacramento?" "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Nathan and I were talking, and we'd like to come visit you next weekend if you're free. We want to bring the kids, let them meet their aunt officially." Rebecca's heart swelled. In the 3 months since their meeting in Sacramento, she and Julia had talked every week, slowly building the sibling relationship they'd been denied. Nathan had also reached out, more reserved but equally genuine in his desire to connect. "That would be amazing," Rebecca said. "Yes, please come." If you're loving how this family is healing, show some love by hitting that subscribe button. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We love our global community. When Rebecca told her mother about the planned visit, Margaret's reaction was complicated. "Are you sure you want me there?" Margaret asked quietly. "I'm the reminder of everything that went wrong." "Mom, you're part of this family too. Julia and Nathan understand that. Their father made choices that hurt everyone. You didn't create this situation alone." Margaret nodded, but Rebecca could see the guilt still weighing on her. The following Saturday, Julia, Nathan, and their families arrived in 2 cars. The scene at Rebecca's house was chaotic in the best way. 6 children between the ages of 4 and 14, running around the backyard despite the light drizzle, while the adults attempted to have coherent conversations. Julia's husband, Michael, was a contractor with an easy laugh and a patient demeanor. Nathan's wife, Keisha, was an elementary school teacher with a warm smile and a talent for managing the organized chaos of multiple children. Margaret sat slightly apart from the group at first, uncertain of her place. But Julia's youngest daughter, Emma, 5 years old, with her grandfather's eyes, climbed into Margaret's lap without hesitation. "Are you Aunt Rebecca's mommy?" Emma asked. "Yes, sweetheart, I am." "Then you're like my extra grandma," Emma declared with the simple logic of childhood. Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she hugged the little girl. Rebecca watched from across the patio, her own eyes damp. This was healing, messy and complicated, but real. "This is so beautiful." If you're feeling emotional, hit that like button and let us know in the comments how this story is touching your heart. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories. Nathan approached Rebecca while the children played, and the other adults were distracted by conversation. "Can we talk for a minute?" he asked. They walked to the edge of the yard, where they could see the Seattle skyline in the distance through the mist. "I wanted to thank you," Nathan said, "for being willing to open your life to us. I know this wasn't easy." "It wasn't easy for any of us," Rebecca replied. "True, but you had the choice to walk away, to decide that our father's mistakes weren't worth navigating. You chose to stay, to build something with us." Nathan paused, his police officer's composure slipping slightly. "Our father talked about you in those final weeks. He said you were brave, like your mother. He said he hoped someday you'd forgive him, even though he didn't deserve it." "I don't know if I've forgiven him," Rebecca admitted. "I'm not sure I ever will fully. But I can separate my anger at him from my desire to know you and Julia. You didn't do anything wrong." "Neither did you," Nathan said firmly. "You were just a kid. All of us were just kids, caught in the consequences of adult decisions." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their mothers, Margaret and Julia, talking quietly on the patio. Two women connected by betrayal, now connected by something stronger, the shared love of their children and grandchildren. As the afternoon wore on, the families shared a meal that Rebecca and Julia had prepared together. The children told stories about school and friends. Michael and Keisha shared advice about parenting. Nathan discussed his work with the police department, and Rebecca talked about her job as an environmental consultant. It felt startlingly normal, like they were a real family that had always been together, rather than puzzle pieces finally finding their places. Before they left that evening, Julia pulled Rebecca aside. "Dad left something for you," she said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a sealed envelope. "He made me promise to give this to you when we finally connected. I've been carrying it around for months, waiting for the right moment. This feels right." Rebecca took the envelope with shaking hands. Her name was written on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize, but somehow knew was his. "Do you want privacy to read it?" Julia asked. Rebecca nodded, and Julia squeezed her hand before rejoining the others. Rebecca sat alone in her home office after everyone had left, the envelope in her hands. The Seattle rain picked up outside, drumming steadily against the windows. She opened it carefully and pulled out several handwritten pages. "We're almost at the end of this incredible journey. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our future stories. Hit that notification bell too. My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, it means Julia found you, and you were willing to meet your siblings. I cannot tell you how much hope that gives me, even from beyond the grave. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I made choices that hurt you, your mother, and my entire family. I lived a double life, convinced myself I could somehow make it work, and ultimately failed everyone I loved. You deserved a father who was present. You deserve birthday parties and school plays and someone to teach you to ride a bike. You deserved honesty. I gave you none of those things, and that is my greatest regret. I want you to know that I thought about you every single day. Your mother sent photos and updates, and I treasured each one. I watched you grow from a distance, proud of every accomplishment, aching to be part of your life but paralyzed by my own cowardice. I told myself I was protecting everyone by staying away. The truth is, I was only protecting myself from having to face the full consequences of my actions. By the time I realized I should have found a way, any way, to be part of your life, too much time had passed. I convinced myself you were better off without me, that my presence would only cause more pain. I was wrong about that, just as I was wrong about so many things. Your siblings are good people, Rebecca. They were hurt when they learned about you, not because you existed, but because I had kept you hidden. They wanted to know you immediately. Nathan and Julia have hearts full of compassion and integrity, qualities I somehow managed to pass on despite my own failures. I'm asking you, even though I have no right to ask anything, to build a relationship with them. They are your blood, your family. They have children, your nieces and nephews, who would be blessed to know you. And please, if you can find it in your heart, forgive your mother. Margaret loved you with a ferocity I could never match. She made difficult choices, trying to protect you from pain. She's not perfect, but her love for you never wavered. I wish I could have been the father you deserved. I wish I could have found the courage to be honest from the beginning. I wish I could have figured out how to love all my children equally and openly. All I can offer now is the truth. I loved you, I failed you, and I'm sorry. Live a beautiful life, Rebecca. Be brave in ways I never was. Love openly. Build the family I couldn't. Your father, Thomas. Rebecca read the letter 3 times, crying through each reading. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the abandonment or the lies or the years of wondering about a father who was supposedly dead. But it was something. An acknowledgement, an apology, a release. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer next to the photograph of her father that she now kept in a small frame. If this story has moved you, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us your city and how you're feeling right now. The next morning, Rebecca drove to her mother's apartment. Margaret was making tea when Rebecca arrived, moving slowly but confidently through her space. "How did the visit go?" Margaret asked, though she'd been there and knew it had gone well. "It was good, really good." Rebecca paused. "Julia gave me a letter from him, from Thomas." Margaret's hand trembled slightly as she poured the tea. And it doesn't change the past, but it helps me understand it better." Rebecca sat at the small kitchen table. "Mom, I need to say something." Margaret joined her, worry creasing her features. "I was angry at you for lying to me. I still am sometimes. But I understand now that you were doing what you thought was right. You were protecting me from a pain you thought I didn't need to carry." "I was wrong to lie," Margaret said firmly. "You had a right to know the truth." "Maybe. But you also had the right to protect your child. Parents make impossible choices all the time, trying to balance truth and protection." Rebecca took her mother's hand. "You weren't perfect, but you loved me, and you were there. Every day you were there. That matters more than I realized." Margaret's face crumpled and she wept, decades of guilt and fear and love pouring out. "I'm so proud of you," Margaret said through her tears. "The way you've handled all of this, the way you've opened your heart to Julia and Nathan. You're stronger than I ever was." "I learned from you," Rebecca said simply. "You showed me how to be resilient, how to build a life even when it's not the one you expected, how to love fiercely and protect the people who matter." They sat together in the small apartment, rain streaming down the windows, 2 women who had survived betrayal and built a bond strong enough to withstand truth. Over the following months, the expanded family continued to grow closer. Julia and Nathan visited regularly. They celebrated Thanksgiving together, both families flying to Seattle, cramming into Rebecca's house, creating new traditions that honored all the complicated pieces of their shared history. Rebecca's nieces and nephews called Margaret Grandma Margaret, accepting her naturally into their lives. Nathan's oldest son developed a special bond with Margaret, spending hours listening to her stories about growing up in the 1950s. Margaret's health remained fragile, but she was no longer facing aging alone. She had a community now, her daughter, her daughter's siblings, her grandchildren, and the friends she'd made at the senior center. This is why we love sharing these stories. If you've been with us this whole journey, please subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message about family and forgiveness. On a clear day in late spring, almost a year after Margaret had first called Rebecca to say she could no longer drive, the entire family gathered at a cemetery in Sacramento. They stood at Thomas Brennan's grave, all of them together for the first time. Margaret, Rebecca, Julia, Nathan, their spouses, their children, a family built on secrets and sustained by tentar novamente esta resposta foi pausada porque Claude atingiu seu limite máximo de caracteres para uma mensagem. Clique em continuar para que Claude prossiga. Continuar.